We are live. The XRP or Ripple IPO and the resurrection of Bitcoin. Michael Saylor just bought himself 1,000 Bitcoin at 88K. Interesting. He's running low on money, but even still, he can only get 1,000 Bitcoin or so at current prices, reflecting illiquidity, ill will, and the market is nothing more than levered players moving the market back and forth. It's almost like a computer program. We'll talk about that. Naturally, we're going to have to talk about silver because silver impacts everything, including Bitcoin, as we've discussed, but we will continue to discuss it because it matters, right? You know, bank or hedge fund insolvency incoming. We'll go through it. Then, of course, there's a little GANN work, a little chart work. You know, we're all going to have to do our little karma purge because I think for 2025, we expected the government to moon our bags. We'll go over that, cry a little bit in our beer, and think about the government mooning our bags in 2026. The Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and the Ripple IPO. Who's talking about that? Not many. I saw Wendy O talking about the Ripple IPO. I brought it up before. We will discuss it in depth. First, silver. Okay, so everyone's figured out by now that silver is a freight train driven by industrial demand. And the Chinese are also helping to ram silver because they have panic buying on a metals exchange that doesn't have all these strange paper oddities that the American COMEX exchange has. Someone's not going to get silver. Someone is panicking. There are stories that there are big banks, big banks. Going to be telling Patreon about these big banks. Big banks are offering huge amounts of money to settle futures contracts. In other words, instead of the silver that you want or need, we're going to give you money, all the money you want. Just don't take delivery of the silver. It's that bad. So you're going to have a problem with a bank eventually. That's going to bring in the Fed next year. That's good. What's not good is that if somebody needs to meet a margin call, large assets like stonks could be affected, maybe. Or somebody could just, you know, the best hedge against something that's going up is anything that moves fast in any direction, which could be Bitcoin, which is why Bitcoin goes to 90K overnight. It looked like it was going to go to the moon. And of course, as is usually the case on these rallies to 90, they immediately get slammed back down. And whoever the forced seller is, for whatever reason, just continues on, and we will probably live with this indignity for a couple of days. Now, here's the good news about silver, keeping it simple. One, there will be a trust issue. Somebody is going to look at how futures contracts work in the United States and in Europe, and they're going to be like, oh, wait a minute. Really? You guys can change the rules and I cannot get silver? Oh, okay. Trust. Two, liquidity. Okay, a major issue, right? In other words, if there is a margin call, it's not if, there are margin calls. Someone is blowing up. When you had silver go up 10%, without boring you with statistics, that's a 1 in 75-year event. Now, altcoins, you know, we look at this all day. It doesn't mean anything to us. But this kind of price action over there breaks computer models. And people are going to get liquidated, and it's not over. Now, again, what happens to the speculators who are on the right side of the trade? All of a sudden, they have huge gains, and they don't want to take those gains this year. They're going to want to take them next year. So silver is probably higher than you think now, and then lower than you think the beginning of next year. Now, of course, where is all that speculative money going to wind up? Because they're not going to be able to speculate on silver. You're not going to be able to get long silver unless you're a giant institution. Maybe you're going to have to go to SLV in the equity market, but you're not playing in futures. They've changed the rules. It's almost like institutional only. So Bitcoin, mining stocks, copper are all possibilities for silver profits next year. Of course, there's also the idea that, the dollar is a joke and that has to mean Bitcoin. I mean, they're buying the Chinese currency and selling the dollar. Now, of course, that currency is backed by metal. I like to make jokes about that. Okay. Jokes on me this time around, but they have a $7 trillion real estate problem over there. They do have all the world's copper and silver, and, it's all over Twitter, but yeah, they have a little bit of a problem. They will never be able to print their way out of. Anyway, if you want to buy the Chinese currency instead of the dollar, we'll see in 2026 for Bitcoin, if it even lasts that long. We may have to suffer the indignity into year end. So silver going up is not crypto friendly until next year because, like I said, somebody will sell larger assets to cover margin calls, or hedge funds will see volatility. Their computer models don't like volatility, and their computer models will tell them to just sell whatever it is they have. Anything. They're like, oh, reduce positions. Okay. Enough about silver. Now let's go to the Ripple IPO. So it's being discussed. This has always been the objective of Garlinghouse and friends donating money to the Orange Man for the campaign. This was the whole idea behind the American-made cryptos, was to get XRP to a level where, Ripple could sell it to fund itself, to fund acquisitions, to build XRP Ledger. They assembled quite a little ensemble of startups, companies to get the stablecoin, layer one, and all that stuff going. Now, of course, XRP people are out of their mind because, once again, they're living with indignity. Like, first XRP was stuck at 50 cents and Solana 10x'd, and then XRP was stuck at $2 and Zcash 20x'd. And Zcash is going to 20x again. So, the hate and the frustration in XRP below $1.90, I'm sure, was epic. However, this Ripple IPO, which again is connected to stablecoins, will probably go off without a hitch, assuming they can get it done after an equity market debacle and all that selling ends, whenever that is. But the XRP or Ripple IPO would allow Ripple to fund itself without dumping XRP on people's heads. I don't think people really get this. Like, in other words, if they filed for an IPO and they got money, they don't have to sell XRP anymore. They don't. And also, ironically, they would become a takeover target of some larger corporation that wanted to have its own digital currency for its metaverse or its tech platform or whatever. Right? They have a huge incentive to get public. Huge. Right? Force someone to come in and buy the company. Most of all, you can have an event where the biggest seller of XRP, the one that holds it back, is Ripple itself, will no longer be selling on an IPO. And this plays into or leads into this whole idea of altcoins are dead. Altcoins are not dead. Everyone said silver was dead 1 year ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago. They're not dead. They're just currently not being utilized and appreciated the way they should be, because XRP is fast money. You're going to see the need for fast money in 2026. There is a reason why every time Bitcoin kind of stalls, Dash, Bitcoin Cash, Zcash, and even Litecoin take off. And like Monero, Decred, and the other privacy coins also are in that group. You know, the future of money group is only going to get bigger, particularly as Zcash literally goes to the moon. You know, it's like Bitcoin won't let people out. Zcash won't let people in. You know, welcome to the glorious conclusion of 2025. But for our friends in XRP, I don't think anyone is saying that a Ripple IPO could allow XRP to join the likes of the Zcashes, the Dashes, the Bitcoin Cashes as just a really old school form of money. Because they're mooning silver, and I know all about the industrial applications, and I know all about the shortages for solar and AI. Every commodity market on a parabolic has a great story. But what they're not telling you in silver, just to digress, is that silver at like 125 is total demand destruction. And most likely silver at 100 means anyone who can switch from silver to copper will do so. Now, of course, this means copper is going to moon, and it has been mooning. But you can get to a point with a commodity where you have demand destruction and then everyone switches over. So right now it's all about one thing. Your job is to figure out like what's the next thing. There's also this idea of the Clarity Act and a change in this administration, because the karma of these law enforcement files that are being released, all I can say is somebody may have to quit. I don't know who's going to quit. Some government official may have to quit. Small ones, big ones. You know, they got to get this crypto act done, or, you know, like all these guys connected to the Orange Man who are doing crypto may have a problem in the years in the future. So everyone's talking about silver. Everyone's talking about copper, right? TikTok's on fire for all this stuff. Should be talking about the XRP IPO, the Clarity Act, and, are you ready? I'm going to do it. The Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. Hear me out. So first of all, I should have listened to Toby, because Toby said they're not doing it in January. I was like, well, that's a huge bummer. Okay. But they did sign an executive order to build the infrastructure for it. I made some dark jokes about it, about they did the same thing with gold in the 30s, and that was the precursor to governments taking all your Bitcoin and cashing you out. However, between now and then, the Chinese have, you know, kind of jammed everybody on gold and silver because that's what they own. So we are going to have to turn around and either, I don't know, sort of take it, or we're going to have to do our own pump up the jam. Otherwise, I don't know what they're thinking going into the 2026 midterms. They need the Clarity Act and they need the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. And I think Michael Saylor just continues to relentlessly buy because he knows it's coming. He knows it's coming. Right. There's all this talk about liquidating him and doing all this kind of stuff. And they can hit Bitcoin for the rest of the year. I think Saylor is going to like reach into the couch cushions and pull out the change and just keep buying. Because if you look at, you know, money coming in from silver, a major crypto IPOs, a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, and frankly, if the existing Bitcoin treasury companies don't get liquidated. In other words, everyone is expecting them to get liquidated now or soon. If that doesn't happen, okay, also, as an aside, if they don't get liquidated, most of the purchases done around this 80K level are larger players coming back into the game. Now, we never know who these larger players are. Like, oh, whales are selling at 120. Oh, whales are buying at 80. We never, it's funny how we never know who exactly that is. I bet it's Uncle Sugar and Michael Saylor buying at 80 something, right? That's why every time this thing goes up and it goes back down again, I kind of laugh. You know, it could be that somebody's caught, but they do the same thing all the time. There's a Sunday pump and then a Monday dump. It's kind of weird, right? They really do want your crypto for something. Naturally, they've got everybody all twisted up and all negative. Now, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin TA, right? If you look at a weekly chart of Bitcoin, you have an oversold situation using a Tom DeMark oscillator. So Tom DeMark was a very quantitative kind of guy, and these are the charts that not a lot of times, these are the charts I'm sharing with Patreon. And of course, you can't see it all down here maybe because I'm in the way, but this oscillator down here, the DeMark version of an RSI is like at 7 on a weekly chart. Now, you've only seen that like a couple of times. You saw it after the sell-off in 2021, right? You had Bitcoin go from like 70 to 40 and then from 40 to a new high. And I think that is entirely possible. It is entirely possible that you could have this thing at 105 early next year. When all the forced selling and all the BS, it's all over. It takes one guy to get on the tape and say something positive. Now, there are other instances, where it kind of like led to a protracted consolidation, like FTX, right? So FTX gave you this like, the oscillator, the oversold indicator crashed, and crypto sat there for, 9 months, AKA winter. Not really into winter. Okay. I actually think, 2026 is going to be unbelievably volatile. Unbelievably volatile. So I'm not really expecting that. I think up moves and down moves will be bigger. So people are talking about winter. I say, nuts, not happening. However, like I said, you have a very oversold situation. You have support at 80. And what are they going to do to altcoins? Are they going to take them down 80% in the next 2 days? Like, what are they going to do to altcoins that they have not already done? Because again, this whole idea that everything's dead. Thank God Zcash blew through 500 so we can have some evidence in people's minds that this is in fact not over. Like, you have Zcash above 500. You have, I think, you have Bitcoin Cash. You have Bitcoin Cash above 600 for the moment. These things to me feel extremely meaningful. And I know we all sit around and debate every single level in Bitcoin. I think the level in Bitcoin is 50 in the Bitcoin ETF. I think if 50 holds and retail sees that thing above 50, they're going to say, you know what? It's going to 100. In other words, silver math, which I just invented, silver math will start coming into people's minds, right? First, there was semiconductor math, where all the chip companies like Micron 10x'd. Then you had silver math, where silver goes from 40 to 80 to 100. And then people are going to sit around and go, well, what's next? What's next? Well, Zcash and certain components of crypto for sure. And if the stock market doesn't fall apart, some of these crypto equities are really oversold as well. So, I mean, there is plenty of stuff to be positive about, particularly since I think people are afraid to be positive. Like, I know crypto Twitter has a consensus that next year Bitcoin goes to 250. I just don't think crypto Twitter understands how volatile it can be on the way to 250. This is not going to be an up-only year at all. Okay, you're going to have disturbances. However, at the end of the day, those disturbances bring in the Fed, and more importantly, they bring in the Fed permanently. Meanwhile, back at the Uncle Sugar Ranch, we are going to have another shutdown in January. And, the banking system can't handle that. So the Fed has already got it started early, and they're just going to keep pushing money into the system. So think about where we are now versus where we were last year. Last year, we were relying on hope, vaporware, and promises from politicians about what they were going to do to get crypto moving. Now, if they don't get crypto moving, they're going to lose the election badly. If they don't get the crypto bro vote sooner rather than later. The Fed was doing QT, is now printing again $45 billion a month, and that number is only going to go up because of this silver nightmare. The Chinese have embarrassed us with this silver and gold move. Both the Chinese and the Russians are laughing at us. So last I looked, the orange man really doesn't like to get laughed at, which means I think the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and the Clarity Act could come back. Right? This is a case, whereas last year it was like wild bullishness and hopium, and it felt so good. Oh, felt so good. Right? It's like, oh my God, we are so, it wasn't we are back. It was we are back, we are staying, and we're never going away. Now it's, you know, I don't know, quantum computing's killing Bitcoin. You know, XRP is dead. You know, nobody's ever going to use ETH or Solana. You go on a podcast and talk about which coin's going to zero. Wow. You know, what a difference a year makes. 2025, the year in review. The year where everybody became bearish 12 months after becoming permanently bullish. We went from permanently bullish to permanently bearish in 12 months. When in fact, the only thing that really changed was like the selling and the distribution of Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin was like an IPO. Like we discussed this, popular thought leader has this. A company goes public, all the insiders sell. That can take 12 months. And then the second that they're done, the fundamentals of the company take over and the stock takes off. Bitcoin is the same thing. Bitcoin does a 10x from the FTX low. Whales go, thank you very much. I'm a billionaire. Capital gains tax rates are low. I'm selling. They sell. They distribute it. You know, there's a winter mute event. Whatever happened in Bitcoin this year had nothing to do with the real value of Bitcoin. What has to do with the real value of Bitcoin partly is what's going on in silver. Silver is a monetary asset. It is also a scarce physical asset. Bitcoin is a monetary alternative and is a scarce digital asset. There is no, you know, mining companies increasing their budgets to produce more Bitcoin. It doesn't work that way. So, you know, whatever you thought a year ago, it's more true now than it was then. Back then, it was like, you know, vapors. You know, we were all so excited. I mean, you had the president of the United States at Bitcoin Nashville. People were out of their mind, right? Bobby Kennedy was going to do Bitcoin-backed bonds. The orange man came in and stole the thunder. And, you know, we just ate it up. We ate it up. We ate it up and we kept eating it up probably until the Binance crash, which was when everybody had to get real. XRP broke below $2. And now there's no bullish narratives in crypto. So says everybody, right? Everybody has a 200K target, but I don't hear anybody saying, you know, if you see 70, it'll be on a wick because stocks go down. Everyone's like, yeah, I don't want to touch it. I don't like it. I want to buy silver at 80. You got to think about these things. Don't worry about what silver's doing now. Silver's going to go to 100 at some point. Probably, if there's risk, it could be at the end of this year, right? Silver will go down in the U.S. session and then go parabolic in the Asian section. And then all those profits got to come out and go somewhere after they stop everyone out. Everyone thinks silver's going up forever. Everybody thought Bitcoin was going up forever in December of 2017, and that was not the case. Now, you know, the fundamentals of silver are not our game. All we want is for there to be no like major blow-ups that result in hedge funds or dealers having to sell Bitcoin or the Bitcoin ETF. If that does not happen, right, this is how low the bar is. If there is no negative event, for Bitcoin, come January 1, there's a tidal wave of money. People are going to take profits in tech stocks. People are going to take profits in precious metals. I mean, there is a lot of money that is going to be interested in Bitcoin, I think, sub 100. And I know there's going to be people interested in the Bitcoin ETF, because anybody that was going to sell that will either sell it now, they'll sell it January 2nd if they want to take the tax loss from next year, and then that's it. And then that's absolutely it. Then you have a full moon on January 3rd, and then see it. Now, speaking of full moons, there is a body of GANN work. You know, there's a little bit of Venus, there's a little bit of Mars, you know, there's the positioning of these planets, and it very much has to do with rebelling against the current narrative, the current system. It very much has to do with a change in the way we do things financially. So could that mean $150 silver? Yeah. Could it mean 105 or 110? Or could it mean a new high in Bitcoin in January? Yeah, it sure could. Because I can tell you right now, the one thing that no one is talking about, like everyone's talking about $100 silver. No one's talking about Bitcoin's ability to go to 120. Nobody. Just like nobody's talking about what a Ripple IPO would actually mean for XRP. It is zero discussion. Zero. Right? I mean, you tell me, like, what are you reading on crypto Twitter? You're reading guys, you're reading the Bitcoin maxis go, yeah, it's still going to 300K. Every moment is a big moment for Bitcoin. I understand that. That's what they're telling you. But nobody is really articulating the case. It's funny. You go on Twitter now, you see a lot more intelligent analysis about silver than you do about things like Bitcoin. It's kind of funny. Not just about Bitcoin, but just about, you have like multi-coin capital, like going, hey, don't forget about Solana. Don't forget about internet capital markets. They got that lawsuit. You know what? I kind of changed my mind on that. I'm like, it's like crypto managed to rally for years when Gensler was trying to put everybody out of business. I'm just kind of wondering if everybody thinks there's no case for altcoins. There is a case for altcoins. I mean, remember last year? It was going to be like, the Orange Man went to conferences and dinners and told people that they can't sort this out because everybody came whining to him that their coin had to be in the U.S. strategic reserve. I think that's one of the many reasons that there wasn't a strategic reserve, because if they did Bitcoin, the XRP people would be upset. I know the Bitcoin people wanted nothing to do with XRP being in the strategic reserve. I know that they got all bent out of shape about that. In many ways, I hate to say it, in many ways, we did it to ourselves. We built up expectations. We created narratives. We wanted stuff to happen that was never going to happen. We went from Gensler to, to drinking champagne too quickly. Now we're back in the dumps. Now we're back in the dumps. Now it's like, we're all bearish. But there's been a change in who owns Bitcoin. Like, I think supply is now more evenly distributed. Like, in other words, whoever was going to sell, like Bitcoin miners, because they're pivoting to AI, or there was a cold snap in Texas, or Chinese miners liquidated to try to put pressure on it, or whales took their money. Everyone who was going to sell has sold. This includes the Binance hack liquidation, right? I mean, it's like everyone who is done doing what they have to do. And the only thing that could happen, I think, next year is that you could have a problem in stonks that could take everything with it, perhaps in February or September. But again, those feel like blips. Who now owns Bitcoin? No one has talked about this. Like, you can go on Twitter and be like, well, there's a bank that's going to take delivery of 12,000 ounces of silver, and they may not get it. I mean, this is all on Twitter now. Nobody is talking about, especially with all this on-chain data. It's so funny. We don't know who sold, and but we're pretty sure someone's buying based on the on-chain data. We have no idea who any of this is. It's supposedly all transparent. There's zero discussion. Maybe we just don't care, right? I mean, you know, prices in Bitcoin is very illiquid on exchanges. In other words, if Bitcoin has been bought and sold by all the big players and everyone goes home and retail is left, you know, fighting over whatever is left on exchanges or whatever they can get done in the OTC markets, this is a precondition for repricing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, the thing that needed to be reset is that, you know, we were too optimistic. You could say we were drunk. Like, you know, when you get drunk, the reason that you get a hangover is because what you did by getting drunk was you borrowed happiness from tomorrow. Yeah, you know, zero judgment, right? No, if you have way too much to drink and you have a great time, absolutely have a great time. But you borrowed a little bit of happiness from tomorrow, then you get the hangover, and that's when the debt has to get paid. Okay. In this particular case, we all paid the debt for the optimism of, you know, fear, greed at 95 with Bitcoin, I don't know, 10% away from where it is now. We all paid the price for thinking that it was up only forever. But that's all been reset. The owners of crypto has been reset. People think altcoins are going to zero. Meme coin and that excess has been virtually purged from the system. In other words, only unbelievably great memes will survive, obviously. You know, I think AIntivirus and their privacy token that's going to come out, Matrix, will undoubtedly be in that group. But still, right? Bitcoin used to be this industry where it was dominated by what the whales did. Now, the ownership of Bitcoin has changed. So this whole total insider game, it may not be that way anymore. And I don't think anyone's thought of that because number go down, right? Number go down. People's curiosity about how things work also goes down. Who now owns Bitcoin? Everyone talks about the treasury companies. I don't know. Who was willing to hoover up the supply at 100? Now, unless you think it's going to go to 30 and they're going to sell at 30, like most macro hedge funds, okay. But if that doesn't happen, like say there's some kind of disturbance in the world in February, and let's say that doesn't negatively affect Bitcoin, then what happens? Right? In other words, 2026 could go from the year of like the hangover to 2025 was the year of the hangover. 2026 is the year where Bitcoin kind of expresses what it's really about. And of course, that takes the whole decentralized world with it. Everyone's like, stablecoins, stablecoins, stablecoins. Do stablecoins float through the air? Is that how that works? You know, they just get from one device to the other? I don't think so. I think they got to move on a blockchain. That's the whole idea of stablecoins. So, you know, SUI, ETH, Solana, you know, they got the internet capital markets thing. I'll parrot it. I got to do a YouTube show, whatever. Right. And then, of course, there's the Ripple IPO, you know, which, you know, is a great place to end the show. Bitcoin is going to have fewer sellers. The people who took the Bitcoin from the people, the OGs in the Bitcoin IPO, the guys who cashed out, the management of Bitcoin, the people who hodled it for years, those people sold Bitcoin to people that are most likely not going to sell. They're not. They're just going to either, you know, they'll get liquidated or they'll just ride it. They will not get out. Like Michael Saylor, like I don't see him selling unless, you know, the company is completely closed. And even in that case, I think all of that Bitcoin would wind up with Uncle Sam, to be honest. It would either go from Michael Saylor to Wall Street to Uncle Sam, or Michael Saylor's just fine where he is. The whale-dominated, old-school nature of Bitcoin is over. Like the cycle is over. Correct. The 4-year cycle is over. The cycle of whales and OGs moving Bitcoin around 30% are over. Someone else may move it around, but those people are done. They're out. And if anything, they're probably trying to get back in if the story is true. And I think the same thing is going to be true in XRP, because when they go public, they will not have to sell XRP to make acquisitions. I mean, I don't know why we would act like that's not what happens. They use that token, executive compensation. I don't know. I mean, there's a reason why XRP will go somewhere and sit there indefinitely. If you took Ripple out of the market as a seller of XRP and then Zcash takes off, I mean, if they're buying Decred, which I love, it's kind of like a old school cult coin, they can buy XRP. XRP people must be out of their mind. Dash had a huge moonshot. Dash is a Bitcoin fork with some privacy features. I love it. But it doesn't have like the brand recognition that XRP has. So the moral of this story is, in crypto, we're taking sellers out of the market. The sellers will leave on December 31st. Can you have volatility? Absolutely, you are going to. It doesn't mean up only. It just means you won't have another 2025 where, a bunch of inorganic selling occurs as the structure of the market changes. That won't happen, right? In other words, Bitcoin went through its metamorphosis phase. Silver and precious metals and all this stuff for the AI data centers is going through its metamorphosis phase. And then in 2026, we hit the ground running. The advantage for crypto over everything, metals aside. But I mean, if you start looking at crypto versus stonks, yeah, they can rotate into small caps. They can rotate into companies that'll do well if we start building a lot of things. But if you want like directional upside, if you want volatility, because volatility goes both ways, right? It goes both ways. This year we had to deal with downside volatility. Next year, you'll have your flushes, but it's not really being talked about the kind of like upside spikes that can happen. The nature of the spikes, right? If you could have Zcash 20x, you could have Bitcoin 1 or 2x. And I continue to believe, and so does Toby. I know it's not the highest probability scenario, but if Bitcoin doesn't go down at the end of the month, if everybody does all his tax loss and margin call selling and whatever's got to go on, and Bitcoin doesn't go down, Bitcoin could go to 120. It happened in 2021. Everyone's like, oh, this can't happen again. What do you mean it can't happen again? Bitcoin went to 60, then it went to 40, and everyone's like, it's over, and then it went to 70. This happened. The Fed's printing again. Okay, not like in 2021. Okay. But they are printing again. There will be a government shutdown. They are going to have to print more. You have to wonder about the currency, blah, 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 right? It's circular. So people are going to tell you things can't go up. You'll look at the failed rally overnight, and you'll look at whatever they're going to do in this market over the next couple of days. They may scare you out of the water for another 2 days. I don't know. That's not the focus. The focus is the hangover is over. The sellers and the people who are going to lean on this market, they've done what they're going to do. Macro will drive the market next year, but this whole thing where, you get super optimistic and they just dump on your head, I think it's going to be a little bit different than that. You're going to have to be nimble, and we'll be talking in the YouTube member podcast and in Patreon about how our guys are going to play this, our guys and our gals. When are we going to buy altcoins? When are we going to buy Bitcoin? And you're going to have to do active portfolio management. I got the roadmap sitting on my desk week by week, day by day, how I want to do this, what kind of week it's going to be. So you want to tune in for that, because we are going to be sending that content down the pipe at the end of the year and the beginning of next year. Okay, let's see all the warriors who are still doing crypto at the end of the year. Alpha Video, good morning. First on the stream, along with GF, right? Zepedas, did somebody blow up unable to cover their silver position? Dude, that has only begun. That has only begun. RNR, MJ hits. Felix, what's going on? Crypto is awful. I want my money back. Dude, everybody thinks that way. Everybody. And that's the key. Everybody. Last year, you couldn't get enough. Now, everyone's done. Grandpa Keeter, 5 a.m. What's up, dude? Hal Lopez out there in Portugal. What's going on? Rock Lobster in the house. Howdy. Right? XRP, Nick Brown says the cheap will get cheaper. Right? We have Yav is here. Welcome. Roby Singh, Jerry, welcoming everybody from TikTok. TikTok's probably off the air by now, right? Welcoming everybody on Twitter. Rave Song Records, Art Caffeine, welcome. Okay, Robin Wyckoff, Andy, Steven, Proud American, 4345. People who are buying gold and silver are not just looking at charts or aren't worried. We just know that the fiat currency that we call the dollar bill is done. Dark. I know. Isn't it funny how brutally people made fun of all those right-wing news channel commercials, which ran incessantly for years? Oh my God. Those commercials, I remember seeing them in like 2004. They started 2004 trying to get senior citizens or anybody who would listen to buy precious metals. Like, you can open up an account. You can protect your family's wealth in the future. You can almost recite it, right? A bunch of people at a picnic table, buy gold and silver for peace of mind. It was a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke. Like, everybody got made fun of. These guys are all in the right-wing talk show hosts. Now these guys are in their basement taking TikTok pictures with all their silver coins on the table. You know, it may be time to go the other way. But this is a great point. The reason you buy silver, the original reason wasn't, people didn't go, you know what? There's going to be an AI data center and solar panel build out, and there could be a shortage of silver, and the Chinese could weaponize it. That's not what people did. There's like, we just want an alternative to paper. That's what it was all about. Now, of course, you know, it's a Twitter phenomenon now, but this person is right. That the people who own it, who invested in it, that's why. And again, it was a right-wing talk show commercial for senior citizens for a while, just like Bitcoin and altcoins and all this stuff is a joke. Peter Schiff with 1 million followers. The biggest reason to buy Bitcoin is that Peter Schiff, the gold guy, now has 1 million followers. Nobody would listen to him. He was a clown. Now he's a strategic genius. When the clowns become geniuses, you sell the geniuses and you figure out what the clowns are doing. The clowns, I think, are buying Bitcoin. Australia in the house, gold to 13K within 10 years, very possible. A lot of people think, you should ask these people who think gold is going, excuse me, let me start over. You should ask these people who think Bitcoin is going to $1 million where gold and silver are when Bitcoin gets to $1 million. You probably can't get an answer. The only person who can probably answer that is Tom Lee, okay, who's now long ETH at 4,000. We hope it works out for Tom. I mean, Tom Lee bought more ETH at 4,000 than I've seen anybody buy all at once. And his order got filled and then it lost half its value. So, Tom, we're praying for you out there, buddy. Right? We have a creature from Jekyll Island. And Lloyd says silver is printing money. And Mark says, end the central banks. Yeah, guys, the central banks, right? They got to finance $9 trillion in government bonds next year. Did I mention that? They got to shut down potentially in January, and then they got to sell $9 trillion worth of bonds, and the Clarity Act's not passed. We are all assuming things will not move fast. We are all assuming that this painful, grinding, awful 2025 will repeat next year. Next year is going to be the year of the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. Right? The Roadrunner is going to take off, right? Wile E. Coyote is going to get after him, get a couple wins, but at the end of the day, Wile E. Coyote is going to get the anvil, right? Crypto will win next year. Okay. It's just not going to be this up only thing that everyone thinks it is. Whatever you think it is, whatever Twitter says from here on out is wrong, right? Bitcoin goes to 110 in January. They'll be calling for a new high exit. Then it'll go to it'll go down. Everybody will say it's winter. Buy. That's the 2026 preview in 5 minutes. The specifics will be in the YouTube member area and Patreon if they aren't already. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. We will probably see you on YouTube only in VIP. Happy New Year. We'll see you soon.